Okay, so this is a meeting of the ARPA Commission on March 7th, 2022 at 1:30 p.m. And the first item on the agenda is to call the meeting to order, which I just did. And then the second, I added roll call just so that it'd be easier for us to keep track of everybody who's here. But if Mike isn't here,
I'll step in.
okay. So I guess we'll just go around. So Jenny Arpin, Director of Human Services. Yep. Donna Latinsick, Robin Campbell, Tina Milos, Erica Wachinski, Stuart Crab, and Troy Spizzato is here. And then who isn't here right now is Mike
Stuart Fisher.
and Stuart Fisher, who did ask me for the link, but I don't know if he got it or not. So, but everybody else seemed to. So, is anybody else? No. Okay.
That should
That's
be
it.
11 because we have 2 online.
And me, I'm here.
Oh, right. Samantha
Samantha and Tom.
and Tom are online. Thank you. Sorry about that. Okay, so next item is correspondence, and we did get a correspondence. It was from Mike McCoo, the chairman of the Board of Finance, and I included it in the packet I sent to you all, and I'll just read it so that if people didn't see it or people online can hear. It says, ARPA Chairperson Milos, at tonight's Board of Finance meeting, March 3rd, 2022, the board again discussed the ongoing questions about the ARPA approval process. While we wait for the final legal advice, the board is aware that our typical financial responsibility is probably not applicable, but our responsibilities may be affected downstream by ARPA expenses having impact on other funds and or costs related to ARPA initiatives that need continued support. Thus, the Board of Finance unanimously voted to send your commission non-binding guidance in the form of the following motion. To recommend respectfully to the ARPA Commission that 1, it declined to approve any projects or purchases that carry future ongoing costs in payroll, operating, or capital budgets. 2, it not approve requests until the legal issues for allocating funds are addressed by the town attorney and can be reviewed by the Board of Finance. And 3, it consider approving funds for qualifying CIP projects in order to free up capital money for other pressing needs. Signed, Mike McCoo, Chairman, Board of Finance, Wilmington, Connecticut. So that came in. And I haven't received anything else. We did send out the public notice. I don't know if it went out Friday or today exactly, but it does say to people if they have questions to email me. So maybe we'll get some other correspondence that way. But
Did it have your .gov email?
yeah, it didn't. Well, I think the public notice did, but what's on the website right now has my old email.
Okay, so we'll want to change what's on the website.
Yes. I'll tell Fish that. But it does get forwarded anyway, right?
It should for a period of time. It will, although I think we may be experiencing some issues with forwarding.
Oh,
So, like any good IT project, there are hiccups.
and I did notice the email that I got from Stuart Fisher went to he sent it to my old email and it did get forwarded to my new email.
Yeah.
So that was
So
good.
if they're just replying to the old one, it will. It's at what point that will stop. So,
Yeah, okay, we'll fix it. Okay, so the next item on the agenda is present to speak. Is there anyone from the public here present to speak?
should be able to unmute themselves.
Yeah, you can unmute yourselves or just use the raise hand button probably. No? Okay. Well, I don't think we have anyone here present to speak, so we can move along to approval of minutes. I haven't seen the minutes.
I haven't
I
even.
didn't see 'em.
So,
Yeah.
so we'll need to table that. And, okay, so unfinished business, that's what instead of using old business, I just copied what planning and zoning does. And they call it unfinished business, which I think is probably good because some of these things will probably stay on the list for some time. And the first one is the ARPA commission ordinance. And
So I will say that our town attorney is spending an extraordinary amount of time drafting an opinion for folks. But what I'll say, and I'll just make it a simple comment, until such time as we're told it's not legal, our ordinance is legal and binding. And it was voted on by the legislative body in town meeting. And so while I understand and hear the motion made by the Board of Finance asking us to not conduct business when we have a legal ordinance that gives the authority to this commission, I hope that language will come and everyone will feel as confident as I do about it. But it's going to take some time and it's going to cost us a pretty penny to get. But the ordinance is a legal ordinance that occurred at town meeting. So I don't have anything, we don't have anything that says it's not. And I think that's where the discussion is. We're working so hard to prove that it is, just because people don't necessarily understand the process.
So did he, you said that he provided some language for promotions?
We spoke about it, so I don't have anything yet in writing. So his recommendation on motions is that we can simply reference the ordinance. So for example, we could say a motion to approve $5,000 for TOV air purifiers. So the amount on a project as authorized by ordinance approved at town meeting effective January 4th, 2022. So the town meeting wasn't that date, but that's when the ordinance became effective. So that's why we use those dates. And that is his recommendation. And we spoke of that just prior to this meeting.
Was the town attorney previously involved in either the drafting or review of the ordinance?
Absolutely.
Okay. Yeah, that's what I was wondering, is just how we're supposed to word it, and also the question about whether it needed to be formally accepted by the town, but if he's.
So again, I think
I just wanted to say,
that could be spelled out there, but the ordinance, gives the authority to this commission. So there's, not as though the town needs to take a separate step.
Right. Samantha has a question.
hi, I just wanted to know if, I'm trying to pull this document up. I had it on the thing, but now it's not. The cloud is not going fast enough to get it onto my phone. But I was thinking that when Mike McCoo had put that information out there, wasn't it more related to expenses that would be expenses in the budget that we were incurring? Like, I definitely understand that this commission has the authority to say we're going to spend this on this and this on that. But when we start to do something that may incur an ongoing expense, is that language all? I haven't read it, so I don't know if that was the differentiation he was trying to make. And what do people think about that? And does the ordinance cover ongoing expenses in the budget?
Well, I would say we can only use ARPA funds to make purchases. I know there's a concern from all, and we talked about it here, of if we continue to spend money that's going to increase the budget later, right? That's not the ideal use of these funds. It's recommended that they be one-time funds, but there may be something that could have an ongoing effect. And I gave to Board of Finance this example, and we talked about it here. One of the projects that was submitted was for the Human Services Department. And so that would have an ongoing increase in the budget because we're adding a position. But the plan by myself and Jenny that was constructed was so that we phase in that increase over time. So instead of making it a budgetary expense that hits one time and then the town is on the hook for something. But I would say what examples that we were given multiple times, we had meetings about this across the state, where you don't want to add 10 new teachers to your staff with ARPA funds. You don't want to come into your town hall and add 3 or 4 more staff members that you're going to be paying for year over year. Those cost the town at the end of the day additional dollars, and you're committing the town to more budgetary expenses, annual increases. And so it can be argued that almost anything we do could add to maintenance in the budget, right? If we purchase radios that I think are, necessary here, there may be some equipment replacement that happens to would need to happen with those. And so most of what we do down the line might have some impact on operational expenses going forward. But what you don't want to do is spend dollars that next budget season, we're going to see a $1.7 million increase in our budget as a result of how we spent ARPA funds. And that's what we want to minimize, I think. That's my opinion.
I see that Stuart Fisher has joined us. Hi, Stuart. Oh, I
Looks like
think,
he's not muted.
yeah, we should be able to hear you. Can you hear us, Stuart?
I just turned my volume up. Thank you.
Oh, okay, okay. I'm just curious if you got my email, because I saw your email this morning and I replied back to it. And I sent an email on Friday, so I just want to make sure you got it.
Is Christine talking?
Yeah,
I got it 15 minutes ago, but I have it. Thank you.
okay, good.
I had to run out for a doctor's appointment, so I got home late and I apologize.
Oh, no problem. I just want to make sure because we're having email issues, so. So that's good. So is there anything else, any other questions on the ordinance or where we're at with the ordinance or questions from the board? No. Okay, so I guess we can move on. What else? The other thing I included in unfinished business is an update on already approved expenditures. So I know that a couple of these are already done and we have actual final numbers on. So Erica, do you want to just
Sure.
talk to each one?
So these 4 items were approved at a town meeting prior to the ordinance that has this commission working now. So there was ARPA 9 is $35,000 for an AC unit at the senior center. That job was completed and the final cost came in just over $30,000. So we saved almost $5,000 there. The meeting room equipment that includes some microphones, speakers, continued upgrade on things in this room and downstairs. They've not moved forward, so we've not spent anything on that project.
Okay.
$57,500 was for the basement cleaning in the concrete in the town office building. We're waiting for one final item, which is a commercial grade dehumidifier in there, but to date, we've spent $38,495.72. So we're still 19,000 under budget. And I don't know, Troy, do we have a rough idea of what?
No, they're supposed to come the 21st.
Yeah, so the end of this month, Troy's meeting with some folks to make sure that the dehumidifier we choose to put in that area is adequate. But I don't assume, it's a pretty safe assumption that we're not going to spend $19,000 on a dehumidifier. So I anticipate this project coming in under budget as well. And the final was for additional air purifiers here in the town office building. We were able to get 4 of them for $22.60. So we saved $240. So the AC units project, so ARPA 9 and ARPA 12 are completed. And any unspent funds would then be available for new appropriations.
Mhm.
And then hopefully by the end of this month, the basement project will be complete.
Okay, great. All right, thanks. So yeah, so on future agendas, I'll just keep adding, just adding them here as we go, but I'll take the ones that are complete off of the agenda because we will, maybe I'll make another column for done. Just so that anyone who's following along can see it and understand what's going on with all these projects. But so then we move on to new business. So the
Hey,
first,
Christina,
Mhm.
this is Tom
Yeah.
Smith. Just a clarification. So those projects that were approved and they're being done, they were approved through the budgetary process or capital or,
No,
No, they were approved at a town meeting. so
Okay. got it,
Specifically,
For use with ARPA funds.
for use with ARPA funds.
got it.
Right.
Cool, thanks.
Any other questions about the done projects? Okay, so moving on to new business, number A, the ones to be received. So similar to what planning and zoning does, I just thought it'd be a good practice for us to just acknowledge the ones that have come in, because if someone out there thinks that they made a request and they didn't actually go through, then they'll see that it's not on this list, and then also people following from home can see it as well. So what I was thinking is, if somebody wanted to make a motion to accept these to be received, then we could just basically list them up. We're not gonna actually talk about them. Some of them I did put on the next item to be heard, and those are the ones that we've already kind of heard a little bit about already, that we knew were coming, that are time sensitive because they are tied to the operating budget in some way, or because they are urgent. So anyway, before we get to the Bs, the ones in the B column, if somebody wants to make a motion to receive the submissions, that would be great.
so moved.
Okay.
I make a motion to, oh, did someone do it?
Sorry,
Yeah.
you can
You
second
can
it.
second
Oh,
it.
I didn't hear you. I second that.
All right.
Okay, I guess we can read off which ones these are. There's ARPA 4, $38,000 for radios for DPW use. ARPA 5, $137,000 for SCBA air packs for the Wellington Hill Fire Department. ARPA 6, $69,000 for the generator for Department of Public Works. ARPA 7, $20,000 for the air conditioning for the HMS band room for the Board of Ed. ARPA 8, $30,000 for the workout pavilion at River Road, which is for the Rec Commission. ARPA 13, $38,460 for devices for town staff and senior center, and that's for the Board of Selectmen. ARPA 14, $300,000 for small business and nonprofit assistance program, that's for the Economic Development Commission. ARPA 15, $15,556 for premium pay for human services staff, and that is for Wellington Human Services. ARPA 16, $235,000 for radios for fire department use, Wellington Hill Fire Department and Wellington Fire Department 1. It's a joint submission. ARPA 17, $35,000 for lights around the walking track at River Road Athletic Complex for the Wellington Parks and Rec Commission. And ARPA 18, $20,000 for drainage at River Road Athletic Complex, and that's also for the Rec Commission. So is
What
there
number
any
is that?
discussion?
I'm sorry, what number is the excavation? one?
The last one is ARPA 18.
18, okay,
Yeah.
thank you.
So we had a motion to accept them to be received. It's been seconded. We just I kind of went through them. Does anybody have any questions about these or comments about the process? So you putting them?
Only going about the process. Some of these projects have some very definitive and up-to-date quotes. Example being the Public Works project. Quote was dated on 3/1/22 and includes the scope of work and exactly what they're buying. Some of the others on the other side, there's just, somebody said it's gonna be $10,000.
Right.
There's no scope of work and there's not even a single quote from anybody.
Mhm.
And I would think that we, for the purposes of appropriate review, before we approve these projects, that we would need to see at least one quote in the scope of work, so we all know what they're buying with the money and how they arrived at that dollar amount.
Mhm. Well, do you think that, and this is a question for everybody because we're making up a process here as we go along, but I would think, so like, let's take the drainage at River Road, number 18, which was the last one that came in. I don't think that one has a quote, but it's also not on the agenda to be heard today.
Right.
So maybe by the time they do get on the agenda to be heard, they will have that information.
So I would ask each of the submitters, to make sure there's at least one quote and what are you buying?
Mhm.
Yeah. With the dollars that you're requesting.
So what I would say is what we're seeing here, and there may be a little bit more information, but I think you're right, Stuart, scope of work. But getting a detailed quote for some of these projects is more difficult than we think that it is. So JNS Radio, for instance, is willing to give you all the information you need. I can tell you some vendors that I've spoken to, unless there's actual money, they don't want to give you a detailed description. So we can give you an overview of what we want and an estimated cost that they've given us. But vendors are getting a little bit leery about giving us quotes for jobs that are not funded. And that's the feedback that I'm hearing, and I know the superintendent, oftentimes we hear the same thing, because they're spending their very valuable time giving us quotes for projects that go nowhere. So I know that, especially right now, we had this whole discussion about how imperative it was that we thought they should submit the things that they need. And I think it's clear as they sit before us that we're not going to approve something that we don't have some real sense of what it's going to be and what their scope of work is. So that may evolve as the process goes on, but to get the project at least into the queue to be talked about.
Because I know in the past, that people would like bids on fire trucks. First question is, a salesman like that, well, how much money do you have?
Right.
Because guess what? The quote's gonna equal the amount of money that you have.
That's right.
Because they know, oh gee, you got 40,000 set aside for whatever. I'm gonna bid 40,000 and I know you have it. Sort of, blindly accept one from what money you think you're, going to approve ahead of time. And, take an effort to keep this all fair, and I'm not looking for 3 bids for everybody at this point, but at least one. You've done a pretty good one on the buying the computers in the town hall and senior center. You have a list of, what's what, and some of them have, so this one guy told me over the phone that, it's this much. I said, well, what are you buying? I mean, with the lighting project for the traffic, River Road Park, I think $30,000 or something like that. Is that all wire? Is it labor? Is trying to get a big one?
But I think, Stuart, when they come before us to hear that project, we're going to be asking them those questions and then give them the opportunity to say, if you have any more before we meet, provide it to us. And then if they get here and they don't, that's an open conversation the commission will have to have.
Process now.
Because they may not have anything, but know they want to do it and got a verbal quote from someone. And it's okay to have a verbal quote, not a written quote. I think at this point, in this stage in the game, that's, that's acceptable for us to start the conversation on.
And part of it is too, is we're just trying to gauge just how big, how many requests there are, what the scope of them and could possibly be, so that I mean, what we know right now is that if we were to fund everything that just has come in the last few days, then the first tranche is overspent. So basically, like, it's good to know that there's that, like, only a couple of submissions. and
That's why I
then-
mentioned before approval, not before review.
Right.
Someone will bring it up, talk about it.
Yeah,
But before we vote on giving somebody a final money, how they arrive at the prices they came to you with.
But I would still say, it's possible that we may not have a written quote from someone, that it may just be a verbal quote. I think recognizing that vendors are hesitant and that costs are going to go up. You're going to hear us talk about in a couple of these instances, Troy got some information today where if we don't act in a timely fashion, we're looking at a whole new number with a significant increase. So listen, this is our IT, so they were able to give us clear and accurate information. Not everybody's willing to do that, especially right now. Their time is money. And we do the best that we can. But I think before we approve, we need to know exactly what we're talking about and an estimated figure. I just have one comment, and this is about ARPA 15. So I have a corrected number, the number we enter into the system. That number is incorrect, but I can't get in there to change it. And so instead of 15,556 for premium pay, it should be 34,379.
okay.
And I was
So-
hoping Mike D'Amato would be here today so he could.
Yeah, so
He told us we can make changes, but I
And then I
found that we can't
I can change it on
on the
the
spreadsheet.
other spreadsheet, but yeah. So we will do that.
Well, this is Stu. I want to be really clear on competitive bids. I would think we want competitive bids, but I don't know how the committee feels about that.
I agree.
And it might be a problem, getting that, because you might want a particular radio, or you might want something else that's specific, but I think the committee will take that into consideration, but I'd like to see at least 2 bids. Well, is 2 bids enough, Erica?
So our procurement procedure is 3 bids or a state-approved vendor.
Okay,
And that's before, so once your project has been approved, before you can go out, before you can spend the dollars, right? So, our approval process, are we gonna say you gotta have those? And then, because those numbers may be very different by the time you're ready to actually go spend the money. So, typically in this process, we get at least an estimate, a quote that we can bring to here or in CIP in some cases, and we give you the best information we have at that time.
okay.
But Stuart, to your point, I think they should be able to at least give us a scope of work. The commission should know exactly what they want, but may not know all the nitty gritty of the, what that particular vendor would do. And that comes in a bidding process.
Gotcha.
All right, any more questions about the process of receiving these submissions? Are we ready to vote?
What are we voting on?
We're just voting to accept these submissions
Oh, okay.
formally as into our system.
Sure.
So, all in favor? Anybody opposed? Any abstentions? All right, motion passes. So these are all in our system now. Then we can move on to the funding request submissions to be heard. So the ones that are on this list are the ones that either were requested by CIP and have a time-sensitive decision tied to them, or I think the other one was for the EDC request for 300,000, because we had indicated that that's something that we want to get going as soon as possible. So I guess we can just start with the first one, which is ARPA 5, 137,000 for SCBA air packs. And that's for Wellington Hill. And I think Tom Snyder was here, and I think he just left for a call.
He did, but that went through CIP, right?
Yeah.
So I know we have some information.
The quote, I asked Tom before he left, the quote was from some time ago, probably before CIP submission kind of thing. And talking with the salesman the other day, there's a price increase in November, and there was another one February 1st.
Oh, great.
So, and the vendors are willing to quote it, but they're only willing to hold the price for about 2 weeks.
Oh,
That's how bad inflation is hitting everything. But probably needs an updated quote, just to make sure that when they have enough money to purchase what they want to purchase.
mhm.
When he was here, did he indicate to you that he hadn't gotten one?
The quote he had
Was old, okay.
was old. And I spoke with the salesman last week, because we're buying some cylinders for that are expiring for our air packs. That's what he said, we have all these price increases and their limitation of holding quotes. You know, used to be quoted for 60 days or even 90. Now it's 2 weeks.
Hey, Christina,
Mhm. Oh, Tom, yes.
if it makes sense, maybe we can just table the fire service ones a little bit later in the meeting to give those guys a chance to come back and just
Okay,
comment.
yeah, maybe he'll be back. Okay.
Can I
Thank
say
you.
that it might be best for us to ask him, this was something that went through CIP, so not
Mhm.
something they needed immediately, right? It was
Right.
something they were planning to get in the next fiscal year.
Right.
So maybe if we can indicate to Chief Snyder that we want, that we need a newer quote, we believe there's been impact price increases, and then discuss it at our next meeting.
Mhm. So, so when I was thinking this through of like what we would do with these projects, I think we can either vote to table it to the next meeting, so it would be heard again at the next meeting, or maybe in this case, heard later in this meeting, or vote to move it to be an item with possible action at the next meeting. So, or to just eliminate it from the list altogether. I think those are our three choices. Maybe there's a fourth choice in there too that I'm not thinking of. But, so either we hold on it, we move it forward, or we eliminate it.
No, I don't see a need to eliminate it. I
No,
think it fits well into the criteria, and at the very least, the criteria of revenue loss
Mhm.
category. But knowing that the prices are outdated, and simply because it was submitted to CIP, just says to me the urgency for it to be approved,
Mhm.
you know, today, I think isn't there. That makes me feel a little more comfortable.
Right, right.
Well, putting this off to our next meeting.
So are you saying to move it to still be heard at the next meeting, or to
Yes.
move it to possible?
I think,
Yeah.
I'd be curious to see what those, you're saying there's 2 price increases,
Yes,
last one.
Yeah.
Yeah,
I think it's better to give it a full hearing on it.
Mhm.
Again, it was something that was requested originally for something beginning July 1, so I just, unless Chief Snyder tells us something different, I just don't see the urgency
yeah,
for immediate action.
okay. The only thing is just the timing with the budget presentation and this. I guess it doesn't have operating budget, because there was an off budget expense coming out of, right?
Well, here's
So-
what I would say for operating budget. This was for, do you remember, I don't have the paperwork in front of me, sir, how many SCBA tax this is?
correct me if I'm wrong, Tom, but I think about 14 or so, 14,
So-
15 airplanes.
So maybe my advice is on the operating budget, it's gonna come down the road when they need to replace all of these.
Right,
Is there a better way for them to phase it into a budget increase? Are they all gonna expire once again at the same time?
They'll all expire at the same, well, I think about it. The cylinders will all expire at the same time. We've run into that before. The packs don't necessarily expire, I don't know, who you listen to. However, it becomes a training issue. The standard for these air packs gets updated roughly every 5 years or less. And so the model that you buy today isn't the same as the model you would buy 2 years from now. And if you're trying to teach your firefighters how to, use the model you have, and then you replace them in dribs and drabs, now you have 5 different models, perhaps all from the same manufacturer, but all have all different features to them. So it's best to replace them all at the same time, so you can have the training consistency.
Mhm.
For them.
So would it be good for us then to say, listen, I think this falls into, public safety, I think is important to use these dollars for, and whether or not there's favorable interest from this commission to approve this down the road, so we give it, like some, not a formal approval, but
right.
But I think if they give.
sorry, the words escaping me.
Preliminary?
Provisional
Provisional.
approval, that as far as indication in the regular budget process and through Board of Finance, is that I can speak for myself and say that I would support this staying for eventual approval from this
Mhm.
commission.
I'd agree, and with this vendor, you can get a quote within 48 hours. So by the time the next meeting comes up, there should be an updated quote, which would also cover the scope of the project, in terms of how many airbags you buy and what other items that go along with it.
And to my point with the Board of Finance's letter to us, a project like this is going to have budgetary impact down the road. It's not immediate, and we're not going to see $137,000 increase to the budget next year. But eventually, this item will be back on the budget when they need replacement of all of these again. So for us to reject anything that has any impact is a pretty
Yeah,
broad
I mean,
statement.
everything's been having an impact.
Right, whether it be
Yeah.
maintenance of that item or,
The pavilion falling down,
Right.
or, air conditioners need.
but it's
repair.
minimal.
But there's a difference between replacing something and adding, it's not like
Yeah.
they're saying, let's add 14 new ones that we never had before.
That's
Right.
right.
It's-
Yeah,
it's-
these are replacing the older one.
Mhm.
Right, and so that's where I just think that broad statement doesn't take into account that there is, the things we're doing are going to have some
Yeah.
impact and in a small way, so. I mean, that's where I'm coming at it from. I think it is really important that we look at these and not add $1.7 million to our budget next year.
Right.
So I would move that we move this item to be heard, well, I guess possible action at our next meeting. This possible action doesn't,
And it could be on the possible action list for a while.
it could be, right?
Like, that's just means, it's sort of like provisional approval, it just means
Yeah.
like,
And I think Eric is
We
right.
need more information.
It's
Yeah.
not something that they need tomorrow. It's like they're all
Right.
broken and people are gonna die tomorrow. But given the price increases that are going on, if you know you're gonna have to buy it anyways, yes, let's say you could wait till July or August or whatever to get it, but how many more price increases are we gonna get hit with
right,
between now and then?
can't even imagine now, it's fuel now.
Right, so I move that we move ARPA 5 to possible action at our next meeting.
Sounds good.
And ask- Go ahead.
Stuart, did you say second?
Sure. Second.
Okay, I wasn't sure what you said. Okay, any more discussion about this one?
So if we could just indicate to Chief Snyder that we need an updated
Yeah,
quote before we could
I will do that.
actually take action.
Mhm.
And Christina, this is Tom again. And the Chief Snyder doesn't get to be with us during the day when we meet too much. So we just afford him the opportunity to speak on whatever, this particular thing when he gets back,
Mhm.
if he comes back.
Sure, and anything he sends me to, we'll include in the packet, so. All right, so all in favor of moving ARPA 5 into the possible action column for next meeting? Say aye.
All right.
Aye. Anybody opposed? Anybody abstain? All right, motion passes. All right, ARPA 6, the generator for Public Works, 69,000.
So basically, the generator we have now is like 25 years old, and we have to automatically start it, like I have to send somebody in.
Mhm.
So this generator would be run on propane, and automatically start if the power went out. So if the guys were plowing snow or during a windstorm, the power went out and somebody needed fuel, then they wouldn't have to come back, start the generator. It would be automatically run.
Mhm.
So I think of times like during Isaias, when everyone was out of power, if power had gone out there as well, our fire trucks need to be able to
Well, yeah,
get
typically
fuel,
we call
everybody.
and it could be in the middle of the night, just
Right.
from a random power outage. Hey, the pumps aren't working, we need fuel. We call them.
Yeah.
Yeah,
So the automatic start is certainly,
Mhm.
one typo in there, Troy, it said 1,600 kW,
Yeah, it was.
which is a 6.8 megawatt.
Yeah.
The 68 kW should be
Yeah.
Oh,
what's in there.
and as I looked, is there a fuel tank connected to it? Like, because I know like for the school that Public Works has to go fill.
This-
It's kind of funny that you need
Yeah,
fuel to
we-
run the
yeah.
fuel, but,
No, we have a propane tank, so it's a 1,000-gallon propane tank, so
Right,
it would be
okay,
tied
that's-
into that.
okay, perfect.
How long will it last?
I don't know, to be honest with you, I don't.
I think we need to know, we need to know that, yeah.
I wouldn't go that far.
I don't know, you'd be surprised, I mean, it's not.
Well, no, I know based on ours.
but it would run like the one at Hall School every so often, right?
Yeah,
It doesn't
it would
automatically.
automatically start, yeah, it would do its tests and stuff like.
The rule of thumb for the health department, that's where I worked for 40 years, was 72 hours. So I imagine 1,000 gallons would do 72 hours.
Those figures are available from the generator manufacturer in terms of fuel consumption. How do you arrive at the 68?
That was like
Yeah.
that was a verbal from a contractor, so when it does, I'll go get, there's a couple different options too, so I'll get something that's a little bit.
What's the name brand?
I don't have a pepper. I don't know what, it was kind of just what he deals with, it's a local electrician, so that's,
So we just got one verbal quote.
Yeah, it was a verbal quote.
So what I want to suggest, I bought a few generators in my time, but super experienced, at least I have some. My recommendation is that you purchase the generator from the manufacturer based on the qualities of that generator. It's, somewhat of a Ford, Chevy, Lamborghini kind of setup. It also allows you to pick the vendor who's going to do the wiring, electrician, and get the best price for that. What I have seen happen in other towns is they come out with a lump sum of money. The vendor will give you the cheapest generator possible in order to put more money in his pocket. And each of the, what I call the name brand outfits. They have, salesmen, all they do is sell the generator. They don't install it. You still deal with your local electrician and you can get a price on that. And they give you the figures on what the fuel running time is. And if you can get a ammeter stuck in your incoming power, example, one place I know of that they tested the building, took 17 kW, 17,000 watts for everything. We went around, turn on garage doors up and down, turn heat, the AC, anything we could turn on, we could turn on with 17 kW. And they went out and bought a 50 kW. Now, certainly allows some room for growth, but having it almost 3 times the size of what you need, that's why you test it ahead of time. What is our consumption in the building and add an appropriate amount for future growth. And similar to our discussion before, the scope of the project, what are you buying? There's different sound level cabinets you get where you don't really have any neighbors, different dogs, but there's options involved in the different generators that contribute to the cost there as well.
Anybody have any other comments or questions about ARPA 6?
Well, this is one I'll say is necessary. And again, speaks to public safety and was an item that came from CIP. So my 2 cents is that I think this is something, again, provisionally, I would support as we move forward, and we may need more information to give the go ahead to go out to bid, but I think this is really important for us to have.
So the motion?
Yes, I move to move ARPA 6 Public Works generator to possible action.
I'll second it. Tom Smith.
Oh, Tom. Okay.
Can I ask a question, Christina?
Yeah.
Yeah, as far as we talked about public, excuse the dogs in the background, public hearing on all these items. Where do we think a public hearing before we actually commit to the funds for any of this stuff is going to come? Is anybody's thinking changed on that? What are we thinking on that?
Yeah. I don't know. I've thought a lot about that actually, of how we would do it. And I think that maybe we have like a public hearing once we have a few of them to do.
I mean, we have present to speak, we have correspondence. So in
Yeah.
terms of getting feedback in a timely manner for any of these projects as they're being reviewed, people could, watch the recording or the minutes and then either attend a meeting or send a letter and saying, I like that idea, I don't like that idea.
Yeah, I mean,
So the opportunity exists for people to give some feedback.
I like the idea of having a public hearing in the evening time when residents who can't attend a daytime meeting attend. I think it's important that we're talking about spending dollars for residents of all voting ages, whether they be 18 or 98, and they may or may not be comfortable watching a meeting in this setting, going back and watching YouTube. That public input is really important. So I don't see a negative side to having a public hearing so that they hear from us at a more convenient time than these meetings. This is great for the work that we're doing, and then schedule a public hearing with several of them on the agenda.
it's just the timing of when we would do that.
Right.
Is it when we would have, is it before we actually make any appropriation motions? Once we have a short list of these possible action items? Or is it, and it's gonna be a rolling thing, so maybe it's like every 3 months we have one, just sort of planned.
But does that mean it's 3 months before we approve any of these projects and get moving?
Let all the projects up.
Right, yeah, we don't wanna wait that long.
It's a long wait.
Right. Well, especially we're talking about hearing increases in cost, over a couple of weeks, but I still think it's important that we give them the opportunity to speak to us, whether or not we think some can wait. Again, the public works generator, the first 2 that we've talked about, the motions on the floor and the previous one, were things that are asked for in CIP for next fiscal year. So I don't feel the urgency on those projects is there to say, let's do it tomorrow. There's certainly a cost associated with DPW every time they have to go out and start the generator, if that were to happen between now and then. But I just don't feel the urgency that it has to be voted on today or even at our next meeting, that we could probably try to compile as many of those together and hear them before we move forward. And some we may say, this is urgent enough that, we know we can and we should take action.
Mhm.
That's my 2 cents.
Okay, well, maybe, we got our first round of submissions, and I'm not sure that we're expecting any more that are gonna, come in, but even if we do, if we were to say in 2 weeks from now, we'll have a public hearing, just to like present all of this in the evening, just what our process is, what the projects that we already have are, where we're at with all of these things. Maybe an update on the ordinance, like all of that we could do. And it doesn't, a public hearing would be called by the selectmen, right?
Yes, and
So-
which, you and I spoke about, should we vote on this motion before?
Oh, yeah, let's go ahead.
And
Yeah. So, all right, well, we'll go back to that, but for now, there's a motion to move this to the to be heard column, ARPA 6. Is there a second on that?
There was Tom.
Tom,
seconded.
okay, so all in favor?
Aye.
Anybody opposed? Any abstentions? No. All right, so that one passes. It's gonna move on.
One of the things we can use the money for is to cover some expenses as a result of ARPA and in our spending, and specifically when I start to think about the legal notice requirements we have. And that while it's really important, it's certainly not something that the town budgeted for. And so if we can set it up as a project, I just didn't have really any idea what kind of cost to put in there. If we budget for several public hearings, and that way we can, the cost to cover the legal warning would be in there. And it could be $200, it could be $600. It depends on the amount of text and what the current cost at the newspaper is. But, if I put in a project for us to set aside some funds out of ARPA,
Right.
Would your legal fees for the ARPA review fall into that category as well?
well, listen, that's up to this commission,
Yeah.
we have to decide. But Board of Finance, if they wanted to spend some money, I'm happy to pass along some of those costs so that, if their budget can handle it. Otherwise, it's coming out of the town's legal fees.
So you would say that, so basically, we're talking about ARPA 19 project is in itself an expenditure to do our public hearing.
Yes.
Potentially to pay for some legal expenses.
Yeah.
And that sort of thing.
I don't know about the legal expenses, but certainly the legal
Yeah.
warnings could be used there. If we chose to hire someone separate to do any of the grant reporting things and do that aside from Donna's office or additional funds. So it's something for us to think about.
Yeah, no, definitely.
Covering the expenses with some ARPA funds.
And we do have the budget hearing coming up in April already. So maybe we could piggyback off of that, just to be like a line item in that hearing. Not have,
I don't know that I'd mix the two,
yeah.
because you've got a budget hearing on specifically just the budget and then a Board of Finance meeting after. I don't know what you think about that, Donna. I don't know that I would marry the two together.
Yeah, timing wise. I don't know. How soon do you think that we could have a public hearing?
Like, I would say within 2 weeks.
Yeah.
I mean, if we had some language on a filing to put together.
But the mechanics of it are the Board of Selectmen will call the hearing, because we can't really call a hearing for ourselves. And then,
If we wait for our regular meetings, we meet tonight and then we don't meet again for 2 weeks.
right,
If you had a public hearing you wanted and there was a need for us to call a special meeting to warn it, we could go that direction.
okay.
And it would be more than 5 days in the paper,
Mhm.
so you can count the day of print or like the first day of print or the day of the meeting, but you can't.
Can't both.
Mm.
So
Yeah, so I think we could do that. Does that sound good to you, Tom? In theory?
Yeah, no, that's all good, thanks.
Okay. All right, then we can move on to ARPA 7, the 20,000 for the AC for the band room, which I know I tried to email Phil and I saw this morning that it got bounced back, but I don't know if it, I don't know if you actually got it or not.
Did you send it to a .gov?
Yeah.
They did not. So the board
Oh.
of this, part of this project was separating the town and the Board of Ed.
Mhm.
So the town is .gov, the Board of Ed is still .org.
Oh, okay.
So
That's why.
that would explain why.
So he's not here,
I
but this,
can explain a little bit about that.
Mhm.
Uh,
Oh, good.
It's been on CIP
CIP.
thing for a few years. The band room has a single window more or less to open up for ventilation, but it is at ground level. And anybody walking up that section of the school up where the dumpsters are and the back entrances there, if that window was open, they potentially could have access to the building. And so what they wanted to do is be able to leave that window closed, but obviously in the warmer weather, they need something in there, so they put an AC unit in there so they could leave the building secure, but still have it appropriately cool.
Mhm.
I believe the photographs that the superintendent showed us at CIP had someone standing in the window and it was about waist high.
Yeah.
So they could physically climb right in without.
And the kids could climb out too.
Yes. They're escaping. They don't like band. Could we
So,
leave this to be heard to give Bill an opportunity to meet with us next time?
yes, okay, yeah, we'll leave that one there. ARPA 8. Oh, actually, we need a motion to keep it on heard.
I'll make a motion to keep item 3, ARPA 7, to be heard at our next meeting.
Second,
All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Abstentions? All right, that's gonna stay on. ARPA 8, number 4, 30,000 for the workout pavilion at River Road Complex. I had sent it to Alan Humphrey as well, to present on this. And I did tell him that, there has been this talk about it potentially, being, that it's lower, for them, I think it's lower priority than some of these other things that they recently submitted, so, that's sort of how he explained it to me, is that.
I'll shed some-
that they
I'll
don't wanna
shed-
pull it.
I'll shed some light on that. We really can't do the workout area until we fix the drainage issue underneath it. So it's just not a good way to do it. So we got to fix the drainage first and then come back and do the pavilion.
are the lights
I
for the
agree with
walking
that.
track a priority over the pavilion?
What?
Are the lights for the walking track more of a priority than the pavilion?
The lights are for the walking track.
Which
Yeah.
one's more important?
How would you prioritize the two?
Against what? The pavilion or the lights on the walking
Yeah.
track?
How would you prioritize the two? Are you gonna, which one is more important?
Well, one's been approved, but we can't do it right away.
Neither have been approved.
The board wants the lights. I think it would be a good addition for the community. And we really want the excavation to fix that area because it's really unusable.
Yeah, Alan showed me a photo. He had indicated to me when we spoke last week that they were gonna remove this one because the drainage needs to be done. Like currently, it's that entire area is saturated and now iced over. So in the winter, it's almost unusable. In the
Yeah,
spring,
it's a problem.
right, the water soaks into the ground, so you don't need it. There's some puddles and it puddles over onto the walking track. But right now, you couldn't even walk in there safely. So I guess unless they were willing to remove it, I would suggest we just table this
Mhm.
until we have further information from our Parks and Rec.
What are the questions? What are the questions?
I think that not to shoot anyone's thing down, but to me, this one is a done deal. It's like dead in the water. It's gonna be the lights. So I don't know if that's a third option to make a motion for that. So I didn't,
So you're saying to just remove it from the list completely?
I think that this one should be removed, yes, because there's other pressing things that would be more important for, even if they were COVID related, the lights would be more important to people walking. I do walk there. I know that area. I actually think that we do need drainage, but the part of the path that gets iced over, I feel like might melt a little bit more if, there was just trees removed. So there are a lot of different aspects. So I don't know if this commission is only considering one of those two proposals, but if you're only considering one, to me, the lights would be much more effective in, helping the community, getting people outside, more people I think walk than, and also safety, people are playing basketball there at night, and I don't know. That's just my opinion. I mean, so
I would say. it'd be
some of
okay if
these
we
things,
do-
I feel like we do have to make some decisions, and that one, I think I would vote against.
I'm not willing to say just delete it altogether, simply because it's not as though we're weighing out $3 million worth of options for $1.7 million. We haven't met that cap yet. And maybe answering some questions on some other projects and just leaving it here to continue to discuss. It qualifies.
If you read the applications that came in for ARPA 18 and ARPA 17, especially number 18, it talks about the, in regards to the drainage, the Parks and Rec Commission would like to prioritize this project as its number 2 request after the lighting and before the 3rd priority request of the workout pavilion. So that's coming from their department head of what's most important. Is the lighting first, according to Parks and Rec Commission, and then the drainage second and the pavilion 3rd.
And while I hear that and I see that, I don't see the need for us to remove it altogether and say,
No,
we're not gonna be done
agree.
with it.
But just in
Yeah.
terms of priority, they're asking for the lighting first, the drainage second, and the pavilion 3rd. So they could table that one till further into the review process. Does that make sense?
I would be good with that.
Okay. Is that a motion, Stuart?
Sure, I'll make a motion, we table the $30,000 request for ARPA 8 workout pavilion to be reviewed at a future date by the ARPA.
I'll second.
Any discussion about that? Anymore?
I don't agree, but
So all in favor?
Aye.
Anybody opposed? Any abstentions?
Unless Samantha and-
Oh, Samantha's opposed. Okay,
Wait, Stuart, are you opposing?
I'm opposing that you're tabling it. Isn't that what you decided to do?
Yeah.
mhm.
Okay.
Samantha, are you raising your hand to say something or to oppose?
No, I was voting no. I'm opposing
Okay.
that we're tabling, yeah.
Okay,
2 no.
all right. The motion passes. It will just be on the to be heard list, table for now. Okay, so item number 5, the ARPA 14, $300,000 for small business and nonprofit assistance program from EDC. Samantha, are you gonna present for that one? Are you able to talk to it?
Hi, why did we're not doing 13? Oh, I'm sorry, I'm above. Okay. I'm looking at the agenda on my phone, but I was looking at the list on the top. Yeah, I'll present. I don't know what you guys have. Do the people in person have the little sheets that, like the submission as it was submitted to the town along with the PDFs?
I do.
Who does?
Stu has it printed.
Okay, so people in person have it? Okay.
We're gonna get
So,
We're getting some right now.
Oh,
But
okay,
everyone
yeah,
should
because
have had a chance to look at, the link and look at your projects. Did everybody have?
I
trouble
didn't
doing
know.
that?
I was looking them up using the town search thing that Mike was displaying last time. And if you click on the PDF, it will open up, but it's just limited because you can only really, it's just sometimes easier to have papers, spread out in front of
I'll
you as
say
well.
that
Because
by the time this came in, our staff was undergoing some computer changeover work here. So
Yeah.
our access to computers has been limited.
So even
So-
this morning when we came in.
Correct. And even then.
Oh, okay. Well, I don't know if anyone who is watching from home or anything is on the email and wants it. I mean, I could email this PDF, but basically, I'll just read what the PDF had said to reiterate it. the purpose of this program, the purpose and intent of this program is to invest some of the town of Wilmington's funds from the American Rescue Plan Act to assist its small business and nonprofit community in recovering from the negative impacts of the COVID pandemic, as well as to increase their vitality, competitiveness, and resiliency for future growth. A total of $300,000 in non-matching ARPA funds are recommended for this program. So the basic premise is that the small business has to, it's only being given to small businesses who employ less than 100 people, and they have to have operations in Wilmington, Connecticut, and be in good standing. So they will be verified through the state of Connecticut, website as being a business that is a valid business in Connecticut. And I mean, I don't want to read just this entire PDF, so I don't know if anyone has questions.
Just
We
give
would
us a
be
brief,
basic-
I mean, can you summarize it? Like, what's your intent?
Well, I just read the intent. The intent is to invest the funds into these
You're asking for
businesses, so they would have.
$300,000. Right, can you tell us how you want to give out $300,000?
So individual grant awards would be between 5,000 and 15,000. So if that was 5, that's 60 businesses. 50, would be a lot fewer. Obviously, three times fewer. 60 businesses, so it'd be 20 businesses at 15,000 if we determined that they needed that much, depending on how much they were requesting. They have application requirements, and with the caveat that they could be audited later to ensure that they're actually spending the money on what they're saying they're spending the money on. So their requirements to apply would be documentation shall be supplied supporting the number of employees before the pandemic and at this time of program application. That they would have to list all federal or state assistance that they applied for and received, like such as a PPP loan or grant. If they closed, listing of the business closure, if they had to close during the pandemic, if this money would help them restart, or like just, that part I wasn't as clear on in terms of if we get an application, how we will consider it if their business had to close. Would 15,000 be enough to help them restart business? So that one, it is on there because it's something that needs to be addressed, but I don't know exactly how we would handle that. Then also, they need to give us a written statement that details how the pandemic negatively impacted their business, their proposed use of the funds, and how the funds will address the negative impact and how they will be used to add value to their business. So, and then the terms we stated at the bottom. So I did include all this in the PDF, but the town reserves the right to revisit applications, request additional information. Following release of program funds, the fund recipients will be responsible for conformity with the federal requirements. Grants will be awarded based on the fund's availability and number of applications, and they won't exceed 15,000. So, we're just trying to get money into the hands of these small businesses who were most impacted. I even feel now is so much different from, last June when businesses were, reopening. Well, there was more commerce, I feel like, last summer. And then, as the pandemic situation's been up and down with people being out in public, they've just faced different issues all along. But, money, infusion of cash flow into a business is always going to help them in recovery.
Erica, you had a question?
I have a couple of questions. So one, you're saying, this is saying individual grants are up to 15,000. You're saying between 5 and 15. How, can you tell me how many small businesses and nonprofits we have in Wilmington that fall into your parameters?
I really can't. I'm sorry. That Mike knows that, I think, better than I do.
Who is, who's spearheading this?
Meaning, who put it, the managers of the project.
Who plans to look at all the requirements, go through the eligibility, review the terms? Is
The people who-
EDC?
The people who will be managing the project will be John Guznowski. He works, he's somebody that we contract to help with designing the website and doing different things. So I mean, this is in the application that he and Rick will be managing the project. Let me see if I can find our
okay.
submission.
And
I did
guess
put that
I have
in.
some more questions. I wish Mike were here to answer them, like, you know, we're asking for written statements that identify a certain number of things. What is it that do they have to qualify within those statements, right? Do they have to have had a negative impact? What are the qualifiers for how they would use the funds? I'd assume there may be some things that wouldn't qualify. And then I want to know, like, how far is the 300,000 going? Is that? If we have
Well, if it's
seven-
15, I just said that if it was,
Criteria for review, I think is what's missing here. The application
If it-
process is very well detailed out, but the review process isn't.
Right. And I know this mirrors what was done in East Windsor, which was very positive. So I just have some, you know, simple questions. Are you going to get, is there a time period anticipated? Like they can only apply within a 2-week time period, and then those are the final submissions. I know in East Windsor, they had to go knocking on doors to really
yeah,
get folks
we
to
put,
apply.
this is in there. It says actually up to 18 months, they were talking about trying to reach businesses. I think that that is, you know, a longer period of time. That could be something that we could review. I could bring back to them, you know, as a feedback loop and tell them. I thought the 18 months was a little bit of a long time to reach people, but we were talking about various ways, you know, not necessarily knocking on doors, but I think that John he works in East Windsor, you know, with that. So he was modeling it after that. Obviously, you know, the questions that we're asking of, yes, they need to show, you know, asking them how their business was impacted by COVID is to determine whether it was or it wasn't. If they can't show that it was, then they wouldn't be eligible for funds. They'd have to demonstrate it through records, which, you know, it could be revenue, you know, various records, even just a downfall in their revenue and what they took in if they had to be closed. So there are some qualitative things happening there, like some businesses didn't have to close. Some businesses haven't lost any employees. And if they hadn't lost employees, they would be eligible for other funding, including the PPP loans, which turned into, you know, they would become granted if they didn't lose employees. So we wouldn't obviously prioritize that. Just as we're creating a process as we're going along here, we would be doing the same thing to an extent. We get different applications in, and then we're going to have to look at them in light of the other applications and prioritize certain types of applications, people that didn't receive any other federal funding. So there is a bit of an internal process with the EDC that would have to take place to create that rubric for the parameters of like how exactly we're going to, you know, but it's the same thing. If we get tons of requests, if we don't, then there don't need to be as stringent.
So I would disagree. I think the requests need to be the same, need to be just as stringent, no matter if you had 5 or if you had 55. I think you have to use the same parameters, and you're not going to be a little bit if you got fewer requests, right? So
no, but you're even with what we're doing right here, right now, we just said, oh, well, we don't have requests that even total 1.7 million. So therefore, we're not going to knock this out of the, you know, we'll not knock this out of the running of being something because we haven't even touched that funding yet. So actually, it is not that much different than what we're talking about doing here. So I don't mean that we're just going to hand money to people and say, oh, here you go, you can have $50,000 just because you're cute and you have an LLC in Wellington. But I'm saying that, you know, that we're going to compare as we get applications in, and that there is a bit of a vetting process as is going on right here. At this commission, we acknowledge that we're kind of functioning as we go along. We're coming up with problems as we go along, and we're making things up. So we just are asking for the same level of understanding that,
I understand, you know, the whole
it's a process that is,
you'd be less stringent if you had fewer applicants, I think is dangerous waters to wade into if you're going to take this over 18 months. If suddenly at the end of the 18 months, you got more applications and you were really less strict in the beginning than you were later, that's all I'm saying is that this falls into a very different category than some of the other dollars we're talking about. How they use the funds can have a negative impact on the town. And so I think I'm sure John and Mike, from their end of helping EDC, has thought these things out. Maybe we could hear from Mike on some of those things that, I know they've had some time to do this. In South Windsor, again, this was modeled after that plan. It was a definitive amount of time, and I can tell you it happened within last summer. It was not over 18 months' time. Everybody had a length of time to apply, and then they doled the dollars out going.
Well, I could
forward.
definitely talk to them about that. If I use a language saying less stringent and that was the wrong wording,
Yeah.
then I am sorry about that. I do not mean that they would not have to meet the criteria that was laid out here in this proposal that was submitted. They would have to meet the same criteria.
Listen,
All
I
I'm
think
saying,
I don't want my questions to seem to, I think this is a priority, and I think the faster we can get this moving, the better. I just want to fully understand what it is I'd be, supporting and moving forward.
well, we definitely had a long discussion about the rubrics, and many of us were of the belief that the means testing of any social program or any type of putting anything out is an expense in and of itself. Even what we're doing here, every day money loses value, so we wanted to get the money into their hands as quickly as possible, because we trust that people know, a business owner knows best what they need, just like an individual household knows best what they need. And we spend a lot of money, not just here, not town, but just as a society in general, determining, oh, does this person deserve the money? Do they do this? And that incurs expenses of its own. So our suggestion was that, if they applied and they showed some very general that they made less money, so it wasn't, I don't know what you're looking for. Like, they do need to show that COVID impacted their business, whether or not they lost employees. These things would all be factors in our approving money, a small mini grant for the businesses. So I have a question to bring back to the commission, that they want you want the number of businesses and nonprofits. If I can just get detail on the questions exactly as you have them, then I can bring it back to them and hopefully come back with more information that will be the commission.
My question, Samantha, is, so how many businesses in South Windsor, or was it East Windsor?
East Windsor.
East Windsor, how many actually applied, and what's their level of funding? Because I know the 300,000 comes from somewhere, but maybe we could approve less than that to start, and then add more as we go on if we see there's a need. I just hate to tie up the whole 300 and then to find out we only needed 100 or whatever, whatever it ends up being. Or maybe it's more. Maybe there's actually a bigger interest in it.
Yeah, and I really think I'm concerned with the 18-month time to apply, because then I think that's when I think you get into an unlevel nature of doling out the dollars. You make decisions today based on 20 people, and then you get 10 more later on, and if you don't have the same amount. So I think maybe tightening up that time frame. And I'd be curious what they did in East Windsor. And I know Mike can get that. I know Mike has that information. Mike and John have that information.
I do think that one of the reasons that they chose 18 months was, and I'm not even sure, I don't have my own printing of my own submission here. I thought that I had it. It's just, I'm looking at, I don't have things on my printer is broken.
But
so
if
I
somebody
can't
had a
print
direct
this.
impact from COVID that started 2 years ago, I don't think they need 18 months to see whether or not they needed funds.
Well,
right?
exactly.
I think they've
So
known
what
more than
I was
they
looking for, to try to finish what I was saying, is that I think one of the reasons they're looking for 18 months was somewhere in this proposal, they are requesting, which I am acting on behalf of them. I personally did not necessarily agree with this aspect, because it's, in my opinion, should be under two different categories, overall categories of the final rule. But we had mentioned last time, I think Robin had brought it up, that, the EDC has long wanted to do, look at the water supply in South Wellington Village. So in this, as it was written, is if these funds are not used for mini grants after many attempts to communicate with people, and I think that's why they put the longer time period, that then they would be diverted into research.
That's a hard no for me, because
into,
I see them are two separate projects, and if they want to look at funding for another project, it should come forward.
Specifically be for
That's
that
right, so that,
project.
you know, if they're asking for 300,000 in 18 months, so that then we could use it for something else, that gets into,
Yeah.
any one of us could then change our mind on what we thought a project could be down the road.
Mhm.
So I hear what you're saying, and that you don't agree with that. I think the rest of us are with you on that.
Yeah.
That they really should be two separate projects. How much they need.
yeah,
for the
I
business-
agree. I agree. I
and-
don't, I mean, and Mike,
No.
you know, he's not here to speak, but I thought that I would think that he would have, you know, seen that aspect of it. So I'm not sure why it went through this way, why they kept discussing it that
Listen,
way.
I think Mike can only.
But I will
speak
bring that
he voted on.
back.
Right, yeah, right.
He's just speaking on behalf of EDC, so if the commission decided that was what they wanted to do with, that's what would go forth, but that's important for us to hear.
Yeah, and I think the feedback back to the commission is, it'd be great to put that in as a separate project. At least. in the-
I will, I'll tell them that. I did bring that up at one of the meetings, but they continued to present it this way. So this was written up by John with feedback from Mike. So we wanted to put someone, you know, outside writing it, because I didn't want to write it, because I thought it would be somewhat of a conflict of interest being on here and writing that. So so I will find out. So what I have for feedback is the number of businesses and nonprofits, how many applied and received funding in East Windsor, a shorter time frame. And then I feel that there are maybe some more questions coming forth. I would like to clarify them. I don't want to answer these and then, you know,
Yes,
I have one
you want to
question.
know.
Assuming an applicant is eligible and they submit their application,
Mhm.
give me an example of when you would say no to an applicant on their application.
Well, see, again, I think that, like I was saying, I do think that we need to see some of the submissions, because we need to hear from people how COVID impacted their business. But for me personally, one of the ways that I would look at it, let's say we had a person who received a very large loan from the federal government, but I would like to know, and that's been brought up to me outside of here, but I would also like to note that the federal government knows about the CARES Act. They know that they gave PPP, and they still put assistance to small businesses in the ARPA. So they obviously believe that, you know, small businesses are impacted in multiple ways, not just, they're trying to continue to fund them. That's what I'm saying.
What if the
They look
applicant-
at that. I will answer the question. They are going to look at that as, you know, ongoing impacts, or they would not have added it into the final rule. I would look at a business that has already received tons of money as in the form of a PPP loan, which I don't know if you're familiar with those, but they become a grant if the person has kept all of their employees. So if they've already received gargantuan sums of money and they've kept all their employees and now it's really a grant, I think that in circumstances like that, that is somebody that I would look at and say, well, you've already received a lot of infusion, you're doing okay, you know, your revenue, you haven't lost revenue that you've been able to show, you know, if they haven't lost revenue or they can't show or demonstrate that it was due to COVID impacts such as closure or employees being out or something, you know.
What if a business owner said, gee, I didn't make as much money myself, I'm gonna take the money for personal.
I don't know
income."
what you know, I know you brought that up before and said that you just think that, you know, you said, how do you know they're not going to go on vacation or something like that? I don't know where this
What's the
level of,
criteria? What's the
What's that?
criteria for evaluating these? The questions are good. They talk about how to allow the business and organization to become more resilient, how it will be used to add value. Those are great, but I'm not hearing the review process matching what the application says.
but I'm saying they have to, they'll put that on there. What do you, I don't know what you just asked me, how do I know that a business owner is not just going to take the money? Is that what you're saying? You're assuming that somebody's going to apply for this, go through the application process, and then just take the money and go on vacation?
It's possible.
Yeah.
Well,
It is,
it's
anything is possible. I agree with that. That's why we put in there a clause that will go back and they have to show that they've used those funds in that way. So there definitely has to be something written where they would then be responsible for paying back if they did do that. But I guess I'm confused
So I
about what
think
you're
that's
actually
just
saying.
what needs,
What's our,
I think it just needs to be spelled out just a little bit cleaner, and I think Mike can probably do that. I think he's so familiar enough with it that he could probably answer our questions. Donna said it will be audited. That speaks to following the release of funds, that they'll be responsible for conformity with federal requirements and compliance. I think we just
Mhm.
need to hear how that's gonna work so that we feel comfortable knowing that we've given the funds for the right purpose and that there's some kind of tracking there.
right, but Stuart had just asked, I think, how we're going to determine whether it's going to bring vitality. Is that what you're asking? Like how we're going to determine that?
Yeah, that's what's on your document there. Yeah.
Right. So the thing is that we don't have those. I think when we start to receive the submissions, this is at least my understanding of it. Well, those are qualitative things. They're not really quantitative things. So you can't necessarily, the only part of this that's quantitative is the funding. Okay. See, that's the only part that is like, I've lost this much, but even our value judgments, I made this statement in my very first memo to this group that there's always going to be subjective nature. I'm a quantitative researcher, so I know that there's no way that we're going to be able to determine factually this was exactly impacted by COVID in this amount, because there's all of these other factors that go into every analysis that you would do. So I think that when we look at these applications and we see themes, we're going to start to qualitatively analyze them by creating categories of what types of impacts that they've had. And it's only when we start looking at that we'll be able to then quantify those things. So I don't know that rubric is developed. I feel like just like we are developing a rubric here as a committee as we go along, that we will be doing that as a commission as well. But that's the best that I can give you right now.
So I think it's important that we know as a commission that there are ramifications on the town if these funds are taken under these requirements and not spent accurately, right? So if somebody takes the money and goes on vacation and that is fun, there can be liabilities to the town with these funds. And so I think that's the main reason why we have all these questions, is trying to make sure that we know the process is covered as we give it out. So I fully support the project. I have questions on the cost, the time frame, and some minor details.
Mm-hmm. With the projects, so I think that for us to know that auditing process as well, how are we auditing in this group? How are we auditing? Like it was spent this way. I mean, we would probably use that as a model as well. We need to know some of the reporting, because to be able to go back, like do you understand what I mean? Like what is being reported on. So when you do types of reporting, find out what you have to report on, then it funnels down, you find those things, and then you funnel the reporting back up. So the level of detail of
the difference
they can
is
be
with
audited at any time that they would have to demonstrate. But if we got audited as a town, how would we turn around and would we have to pay it back? That's what we need to know, so that we would have to put that criterion on that. That's what I'm trying to say. Obviously, they're going to sign off on being audited.
The difference with the town being, the town would be spending the money. Donna would have all the records and would know exactly who got it, who spent it, who approved it, all that stuff we would actually have in-house. In this case, we don't necessarily have that unless it's collected and unless it's a part of the process. And it sounds like.
But we already discussed this, that she's going to have to cut the checks. We don't have our own little account.
She's going to cut a check to business A, B, C, D, and she's going to give them $5,000 under this program. Now, who is paying attention to how business A, B, C, D spent their money? That is not what Donna, her reporting to Treasury has nothing to do with that. The responsibility then comes to the group that gave out the assistance. So I have to, for instance, the projects I spoke to you earlier, I have to justify how I spent dollars for air purifiers. And so that can very easily be done. What happens to the money after you give it to a third party is what we're asking about, and making sure that can be tracked and what that process looks like. That's not a process we're determining. That's a process EDC would have to be determining.
Okay, I'm just writing down tracking of funding,
And I did.
following
just
dispersing.
math, if there were 60 loans given out at $5,000, if we gave them 300,000, they could give out 60 at 5,000 or 20 at 15,000.
Right.
There's a big difference. Why would you give somebody 5,000 and someone else 15? It's determined on, on maybe their answer to the application requirements. I'd be curious how they justify one to the other. And I'm sure there's been some thought and they may have some answers for that.
So what, oh, Donna,
I want to make a motion that we leave it on the list to be heard again next, in our next meeting.
okay, Donna made a motion to leave it on the list to be heard.
I have to fake Samantha.
Is there a second? All right, Troy seconded. Any more discussion about this? All right, all in favor?
Aye.
Anyone opposed? Any abstentions? Okay.
Thank you,
passes.
Samantha.
Yeah, thank you, Samantha. All right, the next one is ARPA 15, and it says 15,556 for premium pay for human services staff. And actually, what we heard earlier is that it's more than that. It's actually
$34,379. And I apologize that the difference in cost is my error in simply making sure the numbers Donna provided were what I was asking for, and that 15,000 was what I was, well, it should have been a little more, was what I was asking for. But my intent was to take the total increase over 3 years to this department and spread it out so that 75% was covered by ARPA in year 1, 50% in year 2, and 25% in year 3. And the additional would be covered in a budgetary expense. So in year 1, I'm looking for $16,098. Year 2, $11,816, and in year 3, $6,465. And the main reason for splitting it up like that is this is something that does have an impact on the operating budget. We are talking about increasing the salary for the human services director and then adding essentially a position of a senior center director. And taking those hours, incorporating into the minimal hours right now for the human services assistant. And that has a significant impact to the operating budget. So, and a direct result of COVID. And so as opposed to hitting this with one large increase in the fiscal year in year 1, that we phase this in. So by the fiscal year 25-26, when it would be fully into the operations budget, it would be minimal impact to taxpayers.
Okay.
And I did share a breakdown with Christina of these amounts, and I apologize I didn't make it public to the rest of you because it does include potential salary increases. She's a whited out copy that would be a result of a CBA that has not been ratified yet. So that's
Christina,
Yes, Tom.
Madam Chair, I just want to ask Erica, so the Board of Selectmen fully supports this, obviously, then, since
we did, yes.
you seem to be, and this is like, goes right along with all your philosophies, and you're really cool with it. And how about the Board of Finance? I'm not asking you to speak for them. I just wonder, has this been presented to them in any way previously? I just wonder, their response.
So the Board of Selectmen took up this discussion as we began developing our budget and understood the increase. And originally the budget that Jenny presented to us had these increases fully in her 22-23 operating budget. And my recommendation was that we split it so that we could minimize the impact to the departmental increases year over year, and that this was a specific use of COVID funds, a great use of COVID funds, right? So Jenny has seen a considerable uptick in services in both our senior community and our most vulnerable population as a result of COVID. So in the final budget approved by the Board of Selectmen, it did include in year one only a 25% increase, with the assumption that the remaining 75% we hoped would be favorable from the ARPA Commission. I presented that this past Thursday to the Board of Finance. I don't know that any of them spoke against it, but nobody certainly spoke saying, yes, we support that. They were just hearing my budget, but it was presented to the Board of Finance this past Thursday.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
I guess, so when, I'm just thinking of the fiscal years and when the money would be spent. So we have to spend it before when?
Before December, we have to encumber it before December 31st, 2024. And so that's why you only see it broken up over these 3 years,
Right,
because it would be encumbered in 24, and then
Right.
it has to be spent before 2026.
okay.
In this
It would be-
case, you know, the 6,000 could be spent right away
Mhm.
at the beginning of 24, so it could actually all be spent by then. And I didn't want to extend it longer, simply because the idea is, it was not to extend it, it was to make it so that the budget could support it and not see a significant increase in 1 year, and that a 3-year phase-in was adequate enough.
It still is a significant increase in 1 year though, each year. I mean, it's not insignificant.
No, it is not.
And then Donna, mechanically, so the money's in Fund 19, and then you would just pull those funds from Fund 19 each of the years, and it doesn't,
I'll do paycheck by paycheck. You
Oh,
know, like
right.
split it up and a piece of the pay goes to fund the.
Yeah.
Her human services, piece of her pay goes from Fund 19.
okay. Okay, that makes sense. And I'm just thinking like how, so Board of Finance, this does need to be decided on before the budget goes to the
Yes.
hearing, because otherwise you don't know what number to use.
Correct.
Right.
Well, because then if the Board of Finance moves forward and then we, you know, still felt strongly we needed to have this position and this commission didn't agree with the funding, then we would need to find adequate funding, whether that meant pulling from something else in an already approved budget or not, so.
And I'm almost wondering if it needs to be two separate things. One is the creation of this new position, and one is the increase. Because they're sort of mingled together right now, and it's hard to like think about it that way, but.
And so I will tell you that the Human Services Assistant, there is an assistant now that is up to 10 hours, 8 hours a week.
8 hours.
And we're asking to go to 30 hours with a split being the majority of the work at the senior center. This process was brought to Jenny and myself from Seniors Inc.
Yes.
They've actually now asked to speak with us about potentially moving in a different direction of running the senior center away from their Seniors Inc. in the town.
Right.
Taking over that authority. So this was driven in their direction, and I definitely support that position. So yes, there's an increase in salary for the Human Services Director, and then an increase in salary for the assistant, but it's because of new additional responsibilities.
And more hours,
Absolutely.
so.
And furthermore, the assistant position takes into consideration the fact that minimum wage will be going up.
Yeah, so that would be happening.
Yeah.
And is that assistant position in the union as well?
It is not.
It is not
not.
currently. It's 8 hours a week.
I
right now,
would,
so
I would think moving forward, it would need to be.
likely.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. So with
Yes.
that, so then even it'd be probably higher than minimum wage even. With the final. Oh, I don't know what
We'll
the
have to
assistant,
see,
what the
yeah.
assistant rate is, but I'm guessing it's higher than minimum wage.
It is, Christina.
Yeah.
If it was the same as the other assistants, yeah, it would be,
My assistant is the lowest paid
yes,
in. the-
Yours is not in the union.
Correct.
yeah.
So actually, the public works assistant, I believe, is the lowest paid in the union. It's still above minimum wage.
I mean, before I would say it's just, just because I wear my other Board of Finance hat, and I know it's just, it has an implication.
Right.
That in all the years, in the future, so. I'm just curious, like, what they would think of it, and I mean, I don't think it would be appropriate for the board to just decide this here. Because it's part of a bigger puzzle, it's not a standalone thing. But I don't know.
While I agree with you, aside from, public safety, our small businesses, and then human services departments across the state, this is where we need to be looking at our ARPA funds going, and this is a direct impact on folks that are using those dollars. So I think it's, if you want me to look at different numbers from this was not negotiated into the CBA we're trying to ratify. So what we used was $15 beginning salary with that. So this was separate from any negotiations. We could look at another number, but I think it's incredibly important for us to see the need. Jenny, do you want to speak to?
I do, actually, thank you. I have statistics, as you can well imagine, to demonstrate that I have a 32% increase in clientele. 32%. That means for every one client I was seeing last time, I'm seeing 32% more. Me and one 8-hour-a-week assistant. I can't carry this town, and I shouldn't have to. And I shouldn't have to be one of the lowest paid department heads and do so. And now I have to run the senior center on top of everything. I think this is a small ask. I think it's an appropriate use of these funds. And
Jenny, I don't disagree with you at all. I'm just saying, I'm not sure that this is the place to ask. I think it's a Board of Finance
I
question.
think, with all due respect, that the Board of Finance does not understand my department and the services I provide.
That may
So
be-
I guess I see it both ways, that I don't know that the Board of Finance with these funds, look, after 3 years, if the Board of Finance doesn't support this going forward, we have to take another look, and we wouldn't be able to support this position going forward. That's why there is concern with adding positions like these things that have budgetary impacts down the road, right? Because then your boards have to decide, our funding is gone, we're on a cliff, can we still afford to? Which is why I attempted to phase the increase into the budget. But I think it's important that when we're looking at how we're going to spend dollars that were given to us as a result of health and safety pandemic, that this is the kind of department we want to put our resources into. While I could come up with 1 million projects here in the town office building or in the town, Troy would, I'm sure, love to have some projects he's had, I would put none of those above public safety, money to our businesses that are impacted, and to our residents through your human services department.
Christina?
Mhm.
This is Tom. Oh, I mean, keeping with the spirit of the Board of Finance's memo, I'd like to move that we do the same with this particular thing, table to the next meeting for possible action. That's, okay, so I move that.
Okay. Is there a second?
I'll second.
Okay. Any more discussion?
Can I ask that as you'll have a Board of Finance meeting specifically talking about budgets, that when you're discussing the budgets that were presented to you by the Human Services Department and then incorporated in the Selectmen's budget, that you specifically talk about this?
Yeah, no, I'll bring it
And
up.
that we can potentially weigh in on that Thursday's meeting, Jenny.
Yeah, it all starts Thursday.
Right.
So it probably will go on for a couple of weeks because there's a lot. So, okay, any more discussion? All right, all in favor? Any abstentions? Any no's? I forgot to say no. Okay,
Tom's motion was to move it to possible action, correct? That's what you said, Tom? Okay, thank you.
Okay. Thank you, Jenny. We're moving on to ARPA 16, the 235,000 for radios for the fire department use. And
Can I just say something before? I got an email a little while ago that from J&S Radio, that they said it's going up 9% after April 1st. They won't honor the prices they've given us after that. So if we were to order or make an action on this now, that they would honor the prices. Anything after April 1st, it's a 9% raise on everything.
So, and actually, I didn't put your request for radios on here, but is it connected?
Yeah, it
It's
is.
like, as far as it's coming from the same place and
Yes,
there's.
and
Yeah.
they're virtually the same radios. Yeah.
Okay.
And I tell you, because Troy Kate brought me this just before we came in here.
Mhm.
And so the impact to the fire department request at 235,000 would be an additional $21,150, and an additional $3,500 to the public works
Mhm.
impact. So it's an additional, $24,000 in
Right.
less than a month, if we
So-
wait, so.
So I think we could entertain a motion to move that to possible action in ARPA 16 and add the DPW funds, which didn't have on the list, but that's ARPA 4.
So I'll make a motion to move to add ARPA 16 and ARPA 4 to possible action. Item 7C today.
Any second?
I'll second that.
Okay, sounds good. All right, any more discussion on that one? All right, all in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Any abstentions?
I'll abstain.
All right, Stu abstains. All right, now I see Phil Stevens is here, and Phil, are you here to talk about the band room?
If you need me to, yeah, sorry, I just finished Zooming for 3 hours, so.
So we did already move, well, what do we move to table it?
I think we
To be
moved it
heard.
to be heard next
Oh,
time, but if
yeah.
he wants to,
It's hardly up to you.
Um,
I didn't anticipate Zooming for 3 hours. so.
well,
neither
since,
do we.
well, I mean, since you're here, I think that we could do it.
I'm hoping so.
Sure.
We heard a little bit already. Stu brought us up to speed just because it's been on CIP for a while.
Yep, so we're talking about the AC for the banners, right?
Yeah,
So the back of the school that is ground level. And it's an area where we've had a break-in before. But one of the issues that I'm not as worried about the break-in portion as I am when we're in session, that we have to leave those windows open. And so when you open those windows up in your ground level, it's just a security issue. And so it kind of works twofold for us. One is providing AC in that room helps obviously with instruments and moisture levels in that room, but it also allows us to keep those windows closed all the time and not have to worry about opening them up and having any security issues right there. And it is a wall of glass. I mean, there's several. So that's
Okay.
really the primary kind of
And-
viewpoint of it is security based.
and is the 20,000 a number based on, is it an old number?
It is an old number, and what we were looking at is because there's there's a unit ventilator in the room, there might be two, that heats the room. And we could actually look at replacing with another unit that would do heat and AC in one shot. And I think that's what we had put in for the 20,000.
Mhm.
But it was old, it was an old M4 estimate based upon what, square footage of the room. And so that's something that, you'd be interested in hearing. I could easily get an updated number for that. I didn't want to put it as a heating project though, because it's not how it's been in CIP.
Mhm.
But that's exactly how we did the heating unit that was put into the center school gym was put in as a new heating unit with the capability to add AC in the future. And so we could do it the opposite direction because we put it in as AC.
Okay.
So,
All right, does anybody have any other questions for Phil? Does anybody want to make a motion to move it?
Can I? Donna? I
You
don't
can
have
ask
a-
your question.
I didn't have a question. I was ready to. Go ahead. You win.
My motion is to move it to possible action.
Second.
Any more discussion about it? All right, all in favor?
Aye.
Any abstentions? Any no's? Okay, so that'll be on the possible action for next time. And I think
So would
that,
it be appropriate to direct to
What do you
Stevens to try to get a more
yeah,
up-to-date
Yes.
idea?
yeah, so the next meeting, it'll be on possible action. If you're here with more information, that's
Okay.
great. And maybe to the point where the board could make a decision, that would be great.
I have to follow town policy or board policy.
I would say,
Thinking about number of quotes, it's over 10 grand.
I would say town because this ARPA money is the town.
And so what is your town
Right.
policy 3 quotes or is it 2
3 or state-approved vendor.
or state approved? Okay. Okay. I will do that.
Right. Awesome.
Thank you.
Thank you. All right, so we've heard all of the projects that we had on our list here today, and we're ready to move on to the possible action, which we have one item there, which is ARPA 3, 100,000 for a purchase of a second ambulance. It was received on 2/28/22 and heard at the last meeting on 2/28/22, and here we are. Stu, did you want to talk about it?
Yeah, a little bit.
Or does Alex? I see Alex is on Zoom. Yeah.
Either way, either myself or Stuart.
Let me start, you can finish, how's that?
Oh, Stuart Fisher has a question. Oh, we can't hear
I
you.
can't hear you. No, he's unmuted. I don't know if it's your headphones.
We can't
I can
hear
be
you.
Stuart.
Oh, yeah, there you go.
And the other gentleman could be Stuart. If we could make up our mind today, it would help me.
How about,
I'll be
Yours?
either.
okay, you want to be
Yep,
Stu?
so you heard the presentation last meeting, and what we're seeing is each week, either from ambulance or fire truck vendors or
We didn't answer the
Facebook
question.
Marketplace, so they pop up all different places. We see anywhere from, 1 to 5 ambulances a week that could potentially meet our needs. And obviously with no money, they just go by it and for the next one to come up, there'll be something. So the opportunities exist to get something, but we have to have money ready to go, right then, because it's up for sale. And the first person that shows up with the money, is going to end up buying it. We obviously have to make sure it meets our needs and it's appropriately priced, that sort of thing. But it isn't like there's thousands of them to be able to go pick from. Either they're very, very old, 20, 30 years old that you don't want, or the middle of the range, and then there's rarely some better ones. These people who have the better ones usually aren't getting rid of them, so they're harder to find. But we need the ability to move, the need exists as presented before, and that's what we need money for.
Okay. Any questions for Stu?
I think I asked Chief Moore this question last week, what the ongoing budget implication was for this. And correct me if I'm wrong, Stuart or Alex, that you did not anticipate an increase in your maintenance budgets with the purchase of a new ambulance. Is that correct?
Correct. The hope is to offset with the current budget that we have with running both trucks, that we'll be able to slow down on the maintenance of the truck that we currently have. And we're hoping that figure that we gave is accurate. We had there was no increase to our budget for maintenance for the ambulance this year. Or this upcoming.
Increase in staffing for a second ambulance?
No, the staffing is going to be, if we use it for if we use a second ambulance, it's going to be by the volunteers.
Okay, so there is the ability or the possibility, I think of like today, there are a couple of calls around the same time. There's a possibility with with trained volunteers, that we could at any given time have 2 ambulances on the road?
Correct. If we know that there's a crew that's gonna run and be able to do it, then yes. And that, potentially could bring in additional revenue or such.
We did try to get an estimate on the insurance cost of having a second vehicle. They cannot provide that to us till we have the vehicle picked up.
Of course not. What do we pay on the current vehicle? Just to give us an idea of what we pay on insurance on the current ambulance.
It isn't broken out vehicle by vehicle.
Of course.
Yeah, no.
Wouldn't be that simple for us. Is it possible for it, when I say be run by volunteers, we have 2 separate volunteer fire departments in the town? Is it ever possible that if with adequate trained staff from either department, that second ambulance could be on the air? I don't know if you want to wade into those waters, I'm just asking.
So we've done that in the past. I'll use Mr. Smith as a prime example. Mr. Smith used to drive for us very often. I'm not gonna say it's impossible, but I don't know the exact answer for that.
Thank you.
I guess my question or just thought about this is, we don't have 2 ambulances now, so we're actually adding a new thing. So it's not so much what the maintenance hypothetically could be. And we're also purchasing a brand new ambulance in the CIP. So you're talking by having a brand new ambulance, which definitely shouldn't have any maintenance cost associated with it at all. But this particular expenditure is not a replacement, it's an addition. So
Keep in mind, when we bought the last current ambulance that we have now, when it was brand new, it took us over 2 months to get it in service because of the problem inside the engine.
right.
Brand new.
So why not
we
use
don't
the
have
ARPA,
that.
why not just buy a brand new ambulance and replace the one that you have now?
Because you still only have one, and during, not only immediately, but in its lifetime, there's times it's going to be out. It could go from oil change for a day, and miss 3 calls. It could go in for, breaks, and it's 2 days, and miss 6 calls. Or currently, it's more than that daily. So every vehicle needs maintenance, and not having a spare and only having one limits what we can do. And, if you look at your personal vehicles, if your car breaks, you go rent one. You can't do that with an ambulance. It has to be inspected by OEMS, and it takes weeks and weeks to be able to even borrow one. Kind of thing.
So are there other towns like ours that have multiple ambulances that they're not running all the time? I'm curious.
Yes,
We have
Sorry.
had one for a long time. Just because we've always done it doesn't mean we have to, but how much of a need is there for us to justify this? And then to say in 4 years, when it's no longer working, that we say we can't afford to replace it with another ambulance. This could be one of those things where we add on now, but when it needs to be replaced, even with the used, we may not have the funds to do it.
So that is one of the things that it actually is quite common that a lot of communities have a third. I'll use Stafford as an example. Stafford, who we borrowed the last truck from, typically only runs 2 and has a third as they run their third during the summer for events. That's the prime example of why that was bought. Mansfield, they only run 1 or 2 trucks, but they have 3 as a backup summers. Many communities around us have to do the same because they have to have that functioning spare. And I know there's been talks at the state level of actually, they haven't made it a requirement yet, but you can't borrow, they don't like you borrowing other agencies' ambulances. So where we've gotten away with using another truck from Stafford or from Yukon, there's been talks of that actually going away because it's not licensed to the town. It's not certified as a town to use as a second ambulance.
So you're saying down the road, we may not be able to do that, but it may not be required that we have 2. Listen, I support this, and I think from a public safety standpoint, it's a great idea. I just, I have to be open-minded enough to say, when it can't be used anymore, as a town, we may not be able to fund replacing it even with a used one. We're talking about using funds, non-town funds now. That may be a reality that we can't continue to maintain.
I mean, given over the period of time, example, way back when, it's like almost over. Tallinn had one ambulance, it caught on fire, burned out. It was going to be months and months and months before they could get another one. And they actually ended up pairing up with, at that time, we had one paid person. And Tallinn donated a paid person and covered both towns for months. Because Tallinn only had one. Tallinn now has two. Summers has gone from 1 to 2. Mansfield's got from 1 to 3. Yukon's up to 5 or 6 now. There's very few towns that only have one. Even Columbia, who's a smaller town than us, has 2. In an effort to make us available at all times and not have to rely on each lake coming in, whatever distance they're coming from, to handle our calls.
I have a question, please.
Yeah, I see, Samantha, I saw Tom's hand before yours, and then so
Okay.
Tom and you. Yeah.
Oh, thanks. This is one of those that's really high on my list, on the list for me for funding, and it's specifically spelled out as a use of funds in the ARPA framework. This has been talked about, being in the fire service. This has been talked about, a second ambulance in Wellington, for a number of years, and it's actually amazing to me that we haven't taken the plunge and gotten one yet. It does serve to stimulate volunteers as far as having that second ambulance and the ability to get volunteers to come from their homes and involve them in staffing that. It's a real, for me, a win-win all the way around. And just once again, these EMS, as far as being part of the fire service, is the lion's share of what's going on today. And through this whole COVID crisis, the ambulance has been front and center, the staff, the volunteers, Wellington, both departments, but front and center in treating patients. They're out all hours, every day, 7 days a week. That doesn't mean you write a blank check to the fire service. I'm not one of those, and EMS is one of those people, but I think this is a real appropriate use of the funds. And just a point, as far as sometimes in Wellington 1 in the past, if you don't mind me speaking, Stuart, Cobb, and Alex, as far as this, Wellington 1 actually had an aerial piece years ago, and realized for a number of reasons that it ended up not being something that we really, there's disagreements on this, but needed or wanted to support further because of many different reasons, and we no longer have that. So what I'm saying is things aren't always forever. If it's not working, you don't have the staff, you don't have all these things that you need to keep something going. So there's always that, that possibility too. But that's all. It's nice soapbox. Thank you.
Right, Samantha?
Sometimes I have trouble hearing Stuart Cobb with the mask on when he's talking. So I'm sorry, I was unmuted. I said, I can't hear this guy. And I wanted to acknowledge that I said that. I didn't know if anyone heard it, and I didn't want it to be taken as like I was making some comment, but sometimes I can't hear you. But my question to you is, I see in the letter that it says over the last couple of years, we've seen an increase in the needs, and when it's out of service, we must rely on mutual aid to cover our calls or borrow an ambulance. So I was wondering if when the ambulance is down, say for maintenance, obviously I see the value in having another one to just meet the immediate physical needs of people. But I'm wondering do we like pay, like I know sometimes if people go to school outside of their town, they give them a voucher for what they would have been spent in their town type thing. So do we end up paying for that? Like when we borrow an ambulance from Stafford, are we incurring costs by our ambulance being down?
So I will say this last stint that we had to borrow Stafford's truck for about a month, we did have to pay, or we did pay for some maintenance on it. We had to do an oil change and some other minor things that had to be done to it. But yes, we have to incur those costs. We have a very good, knock on wood, working relationship with Stafford. So as of right now, no, they don't charge us for using that truck. But if this was, we were very lucky that it happened January and February. If this was May and June, it was a different story because we wouldn't be able to borrow that truck.
Has there ever been a situation where we found ourselves needing, where other trucks have not been available when our truck's been down and we're not able to borrow one from like the immediate area, you know, that which to me
Yes.
would be a type of crisis?
Yes, we've had that. If we've been out of a truck for a week or a week and a half of, we don't have an ambulance, we're relying on mutual aid, which doubles or triples our call response time. If we're waiting for Tolland to come do a call at night, they have to wait for volunteers to get to their building, then get the ambulance, then respond to Willington. There's a significant delay. Or if our mutual aid departments are out on other calls, we're waiting. To do that anymore, it's hard to do that. It's hard to, borrow a truck from another community. Just the liability alone. If we crash that ambulance, that's on us. That's going against our insurance, and our insurance isn't, we have a liability policy for it, but it's not something that they're very fond of.
Any other questions? So, all right, so
Can I make a motion that we approve this?
you can try.
Want to use my
I don't
new
know.
wording? Can I try? And then you
Sure,
can
go
second.
for it.
I move to approve, wait, I gotta look at the dollar amount. Up to $100,000 for a second ambulance for Willington Fire Department number 1, as authorized by ordinance approved at town meeting effective January 4th, 2022.
I second that.
Have a second.
Oh, sorry,
I
George.
didn't know I was waiting. I was like-
So my.
Madam
Oh,
Chair?
Tom,
So discussion, after having said what I just said, I still think the public hearing and the Board of Finance concerns, I'm not necessarily ready to vote for it today. Yes, today, because I think the 2 weeks are, I don't know, I'm like, I think the first select woman mentioned, we do want to have these things heard, so tell me how that might fit. And I also think the Board of Finance's concerns are, we want to work with partners as much as we can with them. Not that you don't, but those are my concerns. I'm not really ready to vote today unless you can tell me that we're going to have a hearing or something soon. And anyway, I'll be quiet.
So, Tom, I think it's important that people hear about these things too, but there are probably a handful of things that we're moving on that I think are a direct result of, public safety and COVID. And this is one of those for me. And why I feel comfortable making a motion on this before. I think I expressed this before and to Stuart and Alex, that if and when you need funding to replace this with even an older model and not a newer, I think that's going to be a bigger discussion that may not be as simple a process as this. And I don't know that it will, how that will impact, but I think in the current term, I think it's valuable to our residents, seeing the number of times we couldn't staff an ambulance during COVID because we only had one, or I see the need for it. And I just think it's important that public safety at this point, for me, trump a longer conversation. And it has been a couple of months now that it's been kicked around between here and Board of Finance. They've certainly been talking about it. While I know they have some reservations about things, I'm not saying that I can support financially after these funds. How I would have to see it in a bigger picture with town funds, whether or not we could move forward. But this at least gets us a second ambulance to see how it could operate for us in a short time span.
I don't know. I would feel a lot more comfortable about it if 3 things happen. 1, we actually get the letter from the attorney. I'd like to see that. 2, the Board of Finance specifically weighs in on this because they haven't. Like, it hasn't been you know, it wasn't on the CIP ever, as a thing that's been passed or considered. And I just don't feel comfortable with it. I hear what you're saying. I do understand that it would be needed. It's just, it hasn't been, it's not a thing that we've been waiting for or saving up for or thinking about for years. It's just sort of a, maybe something people have been talking about, but it not formally. So, and did I say 3 things?
Yeah. You said the town attorney letter.
Oh, and a hearing. So, I mean, I think if we're talking about having a hearing in just 2 weeks, then I think this could wait to be on there. It's only another couple of weeks. So, Tom?
Madam Chair, I'll move that we table the question till the next meeting.
So Robert's rules, I think we have to vote on the motion on the floor, then do another motion. Yeah.
I don't think so.
You could withdraw.
Or you could withdraw your
I
motion.
made the motion.
Oh, Erica could withdraw her motion.
I don't want to withdraw my motion at this time.
You want to, or you don't?
No, I think we should.
Okay. Okay, any more
Point
questions?
of order, Madam Chair. I'm pretty doggone sure you can make a motion to table the question. And so there's a vote on whether you want to table it, then if that fails, then there's a vote on the main motion.
And he's suggesting that we table the motion on the floor. So he's
Yeah.
voting to table the motion on the floor. and then-
Yeah, I move, right.
Yeah,
And I
that
think
makes
he's
sense.
saying that allows for the motion to come
Oh, I
back
get it.
before.
Yeah, okay. So luckily we have our town clerk here.
So confused. So
I think he's directed to some of why I didn't withdraw.
And then
Yeah.
Tom Smith is motioning to table the motion on the floor, correct?
No, I think he's saying that Christina can do that.
No,
No.
No,
Oh.
anybody can make a motion.
Oh,
to ta-
okay.
To table a question that's before the body and then you take it up next time.
Can you make a motion to table a motion, though?
yeah,
Okay.
yes.
It's the question, it's the question on the floor that you're tabling. And then, so you vote on whether people agree with that. And if they don't agree, then you vote on the main motion. If they do agree, it just goes to the next meeting for action.
Yeah, okay. So Tom, is that a motion to table?
Yeah, that's what it was, Christina.
Table the
Yeah.
question.
I'll second Tom's motion then.
Okay, so we're gonna vote on whether or not to table the motion. So all in favor? All opposed? Any abstention? Oh, Samantha's opposed. So everyone, and Stuart's abstaining. Does that cover everyone?
I didn't raise my hand, but
Aye, okay, all right. Okay, so then we're gonna table this. And in the meantime, we're gonna try to put together a public hearing. And I can bring it up along with that other one, to Board of Finance and see if they haven't have input. Because they might say, oh, yeah, great, go ahead. But
Could I say too, like, if we're going through the trouble of having a public hearing and we are still waiting for Ryan, is it Ryan?
Yeah, I think that's where we disagree. I think we have a legal ordinance that answers the questions. I think people have said they don't agree with the ordinance, so we're working to prove something that's already there when the proof should be on someone who believes our ordinance is not valid. So that's simply where I agree and why I'd be comfortable moving in that direction, so.
I was just gonna say, if we're having a public hearing, we could. But that's, I don't know.
Madam Chair.
yes, Tom?
Madam, first select woman, I get you, and I believe me. And for me, after this period of time in the hearing, it'll be kind of whether we have all those other things, the opinion or not. I hope we have it 2 weeks. But I think that 2 weeks will serve just to get the word out there and just to give people an opportunity to weigh in be that the Board of Finance or the public. And I know you don't disagree with that, and I get where you're coming from. I totally do. And I'm kind of there too, but just, yeah.
Did we voted? Okay.
Yeah.
We voted.
Where are
Yes, we did.
Oh, my
And then we
okay.
added the 2
Right,
radio projects.
right. Okay, oh, right, to talk, to talk about at the next one.
No, to talk about, we added them to possible action for later in this meeting.
Okay. Okay. And so, okay, so ARPA 16 and ARPA 4 radios, fire departments, we talked about. And I guess I would just vote to table that as well, because for the same reasons.
Sorry, when does that price increase?
April 1st. So our next meeting is April 21st. I would say that I'd be supportive of continuing this to possible action at our next meeting, but know that I would, if somebody else didn't, most likely put forth a motion to move forward with this. Even if none of those other things that are discussed happen. So we're talking about knowing right now something that's needed for our fire departments. It's been incredibly effective for the DPW. So ensuring that that radio communication is in every vehicle, I think is important, and saving the town, another $24,000 on top of this cost is important. So we know that it's going to go up. And that cost is everything, right? Then install it, the radio purchase and the installation from Jana is all encompassed in those dollar amounts.
Alex, you got, that's about one, but I haven't seen the quote.
Troy,
So the updated-
30,000 is everything?
Yeah, that's the only thing now, we install the radios, they come and do the antennas.
Got it, okay.
For ours, it is installation. I have not gotten the latest quote. That was just by the voice confirmation that I got from them the other day.
You heard Troy say today he got word that it was going up 9% on April.
Yeah, I
1st.
heard that as well on Friday.
Samantha?
I have- Yes, I have a comment about this. So my only, well, it's a question, / comment. If we table this to be heard at the next meeting, would that mean that it would not make it into the public hearing? Because we didn't really create a process for that, and I just want to make sure that we are able to work within the bounds of the April 1st, potential deadline or whatever, but it is something to consider. That's a 21,500 cost, 9%. So, yeah, did we discuss how things are going to be prioritized in terms of the public hearing? You had mentioned earlier, Christina, that, you were thinking when we had potentially 5 things, and to be honest with you, I'm not keeping track right now of the things that have moved for possible action. So I just thought we might want to discuss that a little bit, because I don't want this to fall through the cracks and not get heard at this public hearing because we haven't discussed it here.
Right.
I actually think the public hearing would be this board, not the Board of Selectmen, right? So the ordinance speaks to all the things this group shall do and shall educate the community and facilitate that process.
And
too,
we can,
so-
and we can call our own meeting. Like, can,
Yeah.
if the rep commission or EDC wants to have a public hearing, do they have to go through the selection or the council?
I don't think it's ever been done before.
But I don't know that they have language, so
But
do you have it in front of you,
PVC
Robin? It's the,
PVC doesn't have to go through the selection, so
right,
Right.
correct.
that's.
PZC doesn't have to go through the selectmen. Some of that is
No.
statutory.
But
Right.
it's, but they're a commission too, so maybe we can do that.
I'm just reading the ordinance to see if
Here it
it's.
So the
That,
ordinance, the commission shall encourage, facilitate, and solicit input from the community.
can we,
That shall educate the public via a hosted presentation and ARPA funds update.
can we at least maybe use our meeting as the public hearing? Like, warn in some fashion, warn that we're gonna be we want to hear feedback and like Stuart Cobb said a little bit earlier, he alluded to this, use our meeting kind of as the forum, but just kind of let people know that this action is pending or that this is what
If we
we're.
were to hold a special meeting, and
Yeah.
the only item on that special meeting was
Was,
input from the community on our project.
Right,
Yeah.
make it as easy, you know, as easy as we can and effective and all that without making it too hard, you know, as far as.
I think you're right, Tom, but instead of using our meeting at like 1:30 on a Monday afternoon, if we called those are our regular meeting times, we called a special meeting in
Yeah.
an evening.
At night, yeah.
And there was one topic on there.
mhm.
I would propose it be ARPA 4, 16, and 3. So 4 is the public works radios, which we're under the same gun in terms of the upcoming price increase. And 16, same thing, but for the fire departments. And then 3 for the ambulance.
Yes,
Limited to those 3 items, I think
and we've got a meeting.
and keep
I
it
think
simple.
so.
And go
Yeah.
forward with that one.
And we could do that even next week, like we don't have to have the warnings and all.
I don't think so, but I would encourage that it be in an evening time.
Yeah, oh
So
yeah,
that may be the hardest to coordinate,
yeah.
but I think that would be,
I think that's a great idea. What if so our next meeting is March 21st, it's 2 weeks from now. So this could either happen before that meeting or after that meeting.
I would suggest before.
Yeah. So
And
next
simply
week,
because we're talking about a timely,
right,
look, we could wait till after that, but if we make a decision after April 1st, the excess spending is on
That
us.
just cost me $24.
Correct.
yeah, so what,
The 2 Thursdays are out.
yeah,
That could kind of set a pattern for how we might want to conduct, you know, all the
Mhm.
rest of the projects
Yeah,
in the
that's a
future.
really great idea, I like that.
And that
That's what was
off week?
bugging me the most about this.
Maybe Tuesday, the 15th,
Yeah, that Tuesday, the 15th works for me, how about everybody else?
or Monday, the 14th. I don't know.
What about, yeah, I like Monday nights personally, but Monday the 14th, so that we're keeping it
Board of Selectmen,
on the
right?
off weeks of
The
when we're
library
committed to
meeting
be
night? I
here.
don't-
How about Monday nights for everybody? Maybe
Is that a
we can-
PCC night, the off Monday from Board of Selectmen, or are they always Tuesday?
I think they're always.
They're always
Tuesday, okay. So then they would be the 15th, so maybe the 14th is a good.
Yeah.
Yeah, okay, I like that, I like that. And should we have it at 6:30, just like, or 7?
You want to do it in here?
Yeah, because you guys are still open, so.
We are still.
All right, so 6:30, Monday, the 14th is our special meeting where we're going to have potential possible action on
Hybrid or in person?
hybrid. Hybrid.
We're gonna have possible action or we're gonna hear from the public?
Oh, yeah, that's a good question.
I think we
I
make
thought
it
we were
the
just gonna hear
public.
from the public and then
Public
take
and then we meet
action
the
at
following
our
week.
regular meetings.
That's, yeah. Like
That
that.
would-
We
that
don't
would-
have, I mean, there's some
that is-
people not present here and I just don't know about making a decision to hear action on Monday night. Like, I don't know who else is not here, but Mike's not
Just
here.
public, we're just educating the public and we're just sharing with them. We have a chance to hear nothing but the public instead of them hearing us debate business, and then at our next meeting. We'll have a better.
And then
sense.
voting would take place on March 21st. Action wouldn't take place till we've heard from the public. Am I
Mhm.
understanding correctly?
Yeah, I think so. That's great.
Okay.
How will we get the word out? Just email as far as warning or just letting people know? What do you think?
So it would be a normally warned week meeting, so it will go out in those typical fashions. And then this is something I think we should share in a separate notice on our website and a separate notice on our social media. Try to encourage people that the first round of spending will be up for
Mhm.
public discussion.
Great.
Yeah, otherwise we don't really have any other ways.
We could send it through the school's digital backpack. We can work with Phil's office and send it there so that everybody, we try to reach as many people as we would, similar to a town meeting.
And how are we deciding the priorities of what is getting heard first, just based on what we've just discussed? Because there were a few things moved for There were a few
Yeah.
things moved for possible action. I know you just mentioned 3 of them, but I think there were more that were moved for possible
And we
action.
moved Phil to possible action.
What's that?
That's the only one,
So
right?
all the ones that were moved for possible action could potentially be voted on and should be heard, in my
Did we
opinion.
move 14, the EDC to possible action, Robin?
No, that was
No.
tabled.
Okay,
But I have
To
the
get more-
generator.
so the generator, the band room,
I have the.
This, the ambulance is the only one that we actually had a motion on the floor to approve.
yeah, but what, I think Samantha's point is valid. We know we might take action, so why not give the townspeople opportunity to weigh in? Even if it takes us 3 or 4 meetings to
Yeah,
move on it, at least we've already done the public piece on those
Yep.
items.
Absolutely agree.
Yeah.
And then if something took a drastic change through this process, we might take it back to public forum.
so we just list everything on this.
I mean, the only one we didn't take a
be
vote
heard.
on is the workout pavilion. I think we all
What
have
about the things that needed more information? We may not be ready to roll out. You know what I mean?
I would say not 8 or 14. I think we had enough questions that, do we feel like all the questions the public might have to be answered on 14?
Well, I mean,
Doesn't matter.
if we just list them all how we did it today, and we just say, okay, these are all, this is a hearing, and this is the process, and these are the ones that have been received, and then these are the ones that have been heard, and these are the ones that have moved on. Even if they've just been received, we don't have a lot of information, we haven't heard about it, but we should mention it as an option. So, like, I don't think we should
I
not.
think
mention
5 and 6, we're waiting for some updated quotes, which could show them before the next
it. Right,
public meeting anyways.
right.
All of the ones you're saying were moved for action?
So
All of the things except less 2 of them were moved for possible action? I thought that a lot of them were moved for discussion. So when you're saying 4, ARPA 4, ARPA 5, the generator, the AC, not the workout pavilion, the devices for town staff and senior center, which I don't even remember.
We didn't hear about those today.
Oh, I was gonna say, like, this has been a long meeting. This is what I got confused about before, because I'm looking at new
I
business.
think 8 and 14
Instead
are
of
the only
funding
things we
request
voted on
submissions.
question, right? So
Does
what
somebody
about
have a list? Does somebody have a list right now, the secretary or who's been taking notes of which ones? Thank you. Of which ones were moved for possible act?
I can't tell from my notes.
I have everything,
Or my
my
memory.
notes say everything except 8 and 14. So if we're moving to possible action, then we can take it to public forum.
Mhm.
So my recommendation would be, and we added 4, so ARPA 4, 5, 6, 7, 15, and 16, and 3 be discussed in a public forum.
Yep. I go back and watch the tape, too.
3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 15, and 16.
Christina, do you think you could just email that list to the members, just so we're all
Yes.
clear? That would be
Yeah,
really
I'll
great.
do and I'll double check. I'm gonna go back and watch the tape and make sure that I get it right, but I'll send a summary to you all, because
Thanks.
before we have the minutes.
Yeah, the minutes are choppy.
Yeah, I think that makes sense. And also, of course, let the presenters know that this is gonna be happening too. And some of them may or may not be able to make it, but.
Maybe they could send a representative, that, like if it can't be done, it could be someone from the board. or
Right,
If it can't be Troy, somebody else. I know, so if it can't be Troy, it can be somebody else. Who can
Okay.
speak
Well,
generally.
I just want to know, I'm looking at new business. ARPA 4 is under new business, but it's not under the funding request submission. So am I just missing when we discuss that? Or is that included with the other radios?
So
16?
ARPA 4 is one that we received, but it's sort of rolled into the ARPA 16. They're coming from the same vendor. So, so we moved that up today to be heard. That's the only one off of that list that got moved up to be heard today.
Okay.
So, okay, so I think, so basically where we're at is we are going to have a public hearing or a special meeting on Monday, what is that day? The 14th at 6:30 here in the same room, but also hybrid. And we will be just discussing our process. The projects that have been submitted so far will be just listing, but the ones that will be really presenting are the ones that are ARPA 3, ARPA 16, ARPA 4, and ARPA 15.
5, 6, and 7.
Yeah, 5, 6, and 7. So that's all we do. Do we have any other present to speak or anybody else have anything? All right,
When's the next Board of Finance meeting?
Thursday.
So you present to them some of the concerns you had in a couple of these projects. for
Yep.
that- for that time.
Yeah, I'll do that. I'm the liaison. So. Yep, I'll do that and see if they have any input.
Our next meetings are the 14th, the 21st, and the 23rd.
No, just the 20, so yes, the 14th is the special meeting at night. The 21st is the regular meeting, that's at 1:30 here.
Okay.
And then we go into April, to the
All right.
first Monday in April is the next
Thank you.
one. Unless we have a special meeting again, which we could do. All right, I'm glad, thank you guys for helping to figure this out. I think.
Well, and it's
I think we just-
it's a cost-effective way to
Yeah,
meet.
yeah, no, I
Let the
think,
public speak.
I think that we just figured out a good process and.
Doesn't planning and zoning mix special meetings with regular meetings?
They-
They have the special, and they adjourn.
Like public hearing,
Yeah.
they adjourn.
Then
public
they
hearing.
adjourn, yeah,
Yes. And since our ordinance says that we shall educate the public via posted presentation, I think this fits perfectly into that, isn't it?
Mhm,
The mechanism by which we do so.
mhm. Okay, well, nobody has anything else to add, I can entertain a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Is there a second? Okay. All right, all in favor?
I second it.
Troy. Thank you all. See you,
Thank you.
Thank you.
see you next week.
Thank you,
Okay.
See you next week.